Active service members, veterans, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stories of Service, an evening with veterans.
After serving with the Air Force here in Vietnam, Kathy Hay joined the Ann Arbor Police Department in Communications and was promoted to become one of its first women patrol officers. Kathy will share a letter to her late son, who served on a secret Army mission and returned unable to recover from his wounds. Please welcome Kathy Hay.
Dear Brian, they say that time heals all wounds. Well, not all wounds. The death of a child is something you never really get over. What I felt the day you died is just as sharp and raw today as it was that hot summer afternoon in 2001. I've simply grown used to the pain. Now, I'm not crazy about sharing my grief with strangers, but I feel very strongly that your story needs to be told. Why? Because your story is the same story as countless other veterans whose wounds are not visible. After the Civil War, they called it soldier's heart. Then came shell shock, combat fatigue, and today we call it PTSD. It doesn't matter what we call it, it's still devastating to the veterans and their families. Now, looking back, I'd like to think I was the perfect teenager. I could not possibly have been as difficult as you were, Brian. But the truth is, I was floundering. I was undisciplined, unfocused, and definitely not living up to my potential. I did manage a year of college before I ran out of money, but after that, I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. Then one day, after a 12-hour shift in the basement of the pizza pit, I figured I damn well better do something. Now, my mother joined the Navy during World War II. And being the know-it-all teenager that I'm sure I was at the time, Vietnam was heating up, and I figured if she could do it, so could I. Well, wouldn't you know, the Navy recruiter went home early that day, and I ended up enlisting in the Air Force. Best decision I ever made. Now, it doesn't matter whether it was the Navy or the Air Force. That's irrelevant. The military gave structure to my life. It taught me discipline and teamwork, and it gave me skills that I could apply later in civilian life. And as any veteran will tell you, I perfected the art of ironing. So Brian, when you decided to go into the military right out of high school, I really thought it would be good for you, dear. But you came back a changed man. At first, I thought it was just the excitement of coming home. But this was different. Something wasn't right. You'd always been talkative as a child, but now you took talking to a whole new level. You would go days, and I mean days, without sleeping, pacing back and forth and back and forth, and then suddenly be in the depths of depression, so deep that I was worried you would take your own life. The rumor among your friends was that you had killed someone during combat. You did not want to talk about it, and I did not ask. I was too busy trying to keep you on an even keel. And when pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps was no longer working, you checked yourself into the VA hospital here in Ann Arbor I was one of the luckier parents. I lived close enough I could drive to see you anytime I wanted. There it was determined that you were severely manic depressive. I remember how amused you were when I kept telling everyone it was just a chemical imbalance, as if an iron supplement was going to fix this problem. To make matters worse, you were diagnosed as refractory. I now know that means the patient does not respond to traditional treatments. I know that because every time they got you stabilized and you were so diligent about taking your meds, it would be no time at all before the debilitating mood swings would return. But through all that inner turmoil, you managed to pull yourself together and go back to school. You missed a lot of classes, but you were determined. I am proud to say you stayed on top of your studies. Soon it was the summer of 2001. Student teaching was going to start soon, and I admit I was worried about relapses. But you were so excited. You wanted so badly to be a teacher, and I knew you would be good. You would be the kind of teacher that students remembered years later as the one that got them excited about history or literature or writing. There is no doubt in my mind you would have made a difference. Unfortunately, you never got that chance. That hot summer night, your heart simply stopped beating. The coroner could not explain it, and there was absolutely no evidence of an overdose. Maybe it was the experimental drugs they had you on. Maybe not. I don't know, and I guess it doesn't really matter, does it? I just know we both lost the battle that day. Me, just trying to keep you alive, and you struggling to maintain some quality of life. When we cleaned out your apartment, I found something that surprised me. Spiral notebooks full of poetry. Now, I knew you wrote poetry, Brian. You'd even had one published in the college newspaper. But I had no idea you were so prolific. Maybe someday I'll get those published for you. We also found that you were teaching yourself Gaelic. Now, that did not surprise me. You had always dreamed of going to Ireland, and in your mind, that was just the first step. So the following spring, we did indeed make that trip to Ireland. And tucked into the bottom of my suitcase was a little bit of your ashes. We rented a car, and we drove those famous roads that dip and weave through a landscape of hills and valleys that are blanketed with wild royal purple heather. Ah, Brian, you would have loved it. When we got to the far west side, among Ireland's 40 shades of green, we stopped beside this fairy tale stream, and there I sprinkled your ashes. Now rest in peace. Love, Mom.